Most people build their financial safety net the exact same way lightning rods used to fail, pointing straight up, waiting for the storm to come down directly on top of them. That image should disturb you, because right now, the way your money is structured, it's built to absorb a financial crisis, not redirect it. And the difference between those two things isn't just efficiency. It's whether you emerge from the next economic storm still standing, or whether you're rebuilding from zero. In the next few minutes, you're going to understand something Benjamin Franklin grasped in 1758 that most modern financial advice still gets completely wrong. An emergency fund isn't a savings goal. It's the first layer of an architecture, a structure. A system designed not to survive crises, but to make you functionally untouchable by them. I'll walk you through the three-layer framework he built, and the third layer, the one that genuinely changes your relationship with economic uncertainty, is something most people have never been told exists. Stay through to the end. That piece is the one that rewires everything. There's a particular kind of financial dread that nobody in personal finance talks about. It doesn't belong to the person drowning in debt. It's quieter than that. It belongs to the person who does everything right, who saves a little each month, pays bills on time, lives below their means, avoids expensive habits, and still underneath all of it carries this low, constant hum of fragility, a voice that surfaces every time something unexpected appears. One wrong month and this comes apart. A medical bill, a sudden layoff, a car that dies in the same week the water heater fails. That dread isn't weakness, it's accurate feedback from a financial structure that has no real shock absorption. It was built for stable ground, not for the economic volatility that now defines the landscape most of us are actually living in, and somewhere you already know this. Here's the part that rarely gets said directly. Financial crises don't announce themselves with warning labels. They arrive the same week your transmission fails, the same quarter markets correct, the same month your industry gets restructured. Every day without a resilient system isn't neutral, it's compounding exposure, emergency debt accumulating interest you hadn't planned for, assets sold at the worst possible time because there was no alternative, career decisions made from desperation instead of direction. The gap between where most people are and where they need to be doesn't stay the same size. It quietly grows, and the moment you notice it is usually the moment it's already closed in on you. In 1790, Benjamin Franklin did something that made no financial sense to anyone watching. He died and left $1,000 each to the cities of Boston and Philadelphia, not as a gift, with a condition: the money could not be touched for 200 years. By 1990, Philadelphia's share had grown to nearly $2 million, Boston's to over $4.5 million. Franklin didn't just write about financial discipline, he proved it. He built a living, compounding demonstration that systems outlast moments, that the architecture of money management outlasts any individual piece of advice ever given about it. This is the foundation of what I call the Franklin method, not an app, not a budget template. A framework for constructing a financial structure that survives anything the economy produces, designed around the same principles that made Franklin, who was born into poverty and ended his life as one of the wealthiest, most respected men in the American colonies, genuinely untouchable. But the $1,000 experiment only matters if you understand the mechanism underneath it. Franklin's genius wasn't just patience, it was layers. He built his financial life in distinct protective layers, not one large accumulation, but a sequence of separate functions, each serving a different purpose. And the sequence is more important than the amount. Most personal finance advice treats your emergency fund as a single container: 3 months of expenses, 6 months, done. That approach fails in exactly the same way a single sandbag fails against a flood. It holds until it doesn't, and when it goes, it takes everything with it. The Franklin method builds 3 separate layers, and the first mistake most people make is skipping the most foundational one entirely. Franklin wrote this in 1758, "Beware of little expenses. A small leak will sink a great ship." Everyone who quotes that line applies it to streaming subscriptions. That's not what Franklin meant. He meant that the invisible, consistent drain on your finances, the small decisions made from habit instead of intention, from automation instead of awareness, is more financially destructive than any single crisis you could name. Because a crisis is visible, it triggers a response. Small leaks are invisible. They trigger nothing. They just quietly empty the ship while you're watching the horizon for storms. The first layer of the Franklin method is what I call the stability layer, not a savings account, an audit. A forensic examination of every automatic outflow in your financial life, subscriptions forgotten about, Insurance policies never renegotiated spending patterns that feel like nothing individually, but collectively represent hundreds of dollars a month disappearing without conscious decision. This layer isn't about saving more money. It's about stopping the loss of money you didn't know was happening. Most people skip this layer entirely. They focus on building reserves without plugging the holes underneath them, which means their emergency fund slowly deflates while they sleep, and they can't understand why. Plug the leaks first, then build. Layer 2 is the crisis buffer, and here's where the standard advice gets the math dangerously wrong. The conventional target of 3 to 6 months of expenses was calibrated for a specific economic era: stable job markets, predictable industry structures, layoffs that were individual, not sectoral. That era is over. In a period of rapid industry disruption, algorithmic replacement, and economic corrections that can restructure entire sectors in a single quarter, 3 months isn't a safety margin. It's a very short runway. Franklin's concept of frugality was never about deprivation. He was explicit about this. It was about strategic margin, maintaining enough space between your income and your obligations that you retain genuine freedom of action under pressure. To size your crisis buffer correctly, calculate your essential monthly expenses only: housing, food, utilities, insurance, basic transportation. Nothing discretionary. Multiply that number by 9. Not because crises last 9 months, but because navigating a crisis well, finding the right solution, not just any solution, requires time. And financial fragility destroys time first. When you're desperate, you accept the first offer. When you have a 9-month buffer, you wait for the right one. That difference, compounded over a life, is enormous. But there's a third layer, and this is the reason why people with solid emergency funds still get structurally damaged by severe economic downturns. During the 2008 financial crisis, millions of Americans had savings. Many had 6 months of expenses set aside. What they didn't have was protection against simultaneous pressure across multiple fronts. Their emergency savings covered living expenses, but retirement accounts dropped 40%, home values collapsed, and the job market contracted for years, not months. The emergency fund ran out. The assets it was meant to protect were already eroded, and people who genuinely believed they were prepared discovered that single-layer defense fails against multi-layer attacks. Layer 3 is what Franklin would recognize as the opportunity layer. And this is the layer that fundamentally separates financial stability from financial resilience. While everyone around them is in crisis mode, making panic decisions, selling assets at a loss, accepting whatever offer arrives first just to stop the bleeding, the person with an opportunity layer is doing something different. They're waiting, deliberately, watching. They're buying assets at prices the panic created, negotiating from a position that doesn't need to close immediately, taking the career move they actually wanted instead of the one desperation forced on them. Franklin's $1,000 bequest multiplied because it was architecturally insulated from human emotion. Nobody could liquidate it in a moment of fear. Nobody could redirect it toward short-term urgency. It compounded because its structure protected it from the psychology of crisis. Your opportunity layer is a separate capital reserve, not your emergency fund, not your investments, that you access only when economic disruption creates genuine strategic openings, when markets correct, when assets are undervalued, when other people's fear creates your leverage. This is not speculation. This is Franklin's most advanced financial principle. The person who retains freedom of choice during a crisis doesn't simply survive it. They emerge from it in a structurally stronger position than the one they started in. When all 3 layers are in place, something changes that goes beyond the numbers. The stability layer stops the invisible bleeding. Your money starts behaving predictably. The crisis buffer returns something that financial fragility erodes first: time, real time, the kind that lets you make decisions from strategy instead of survival. The opportunity layer changes your relationship with economic uncertainty entirely. You stop watching for recessions with anxiety and start watching them with something closer to calm attention, the way a navigator reads weather, not as a threat, as information. That transition from financial anxiety to financial architecture is the actual promise of this method, not that crises won't arrive, they always will, but that your structure is designed specifically to redirect their energy rather than absorb it. Franklin's most repeated line is, "A penny saved is a penny earned." But the sentence that followed it, the one almost nobody quotes, reveals the real philosophy underneath. They are never without resources. Never without resources. That's the standard this method builds toward. Not wealthy, not immune to difficulty, not insulated from the forces that reshape economies without warning. But never under any economic conditions, in any market environment, in any season of disruption, without resources. That's the architecture Franklin built for himself over a lifetime, not by earning the most, not by taking the biggest risks, but by constructing a financial life in layers, each one protecting the next, each one expanding his freedom of action while everyone around him was being compressed by circumstance. The next economic crisis will arrive exactly when it always does, when you aren't watching for it, dressed in a form you didn't anticipate. The only question that will matter then is whether your financial structure absorbs the impact or redirects it.